Hello, guys, and welcome to episode number 42 of the Heritage Agendas Football Podcast. Today, it is just myself, Ibrahim, and this is really the last of these three mini-series episodes dedicated to the FIFA 2026 World Cup, which at the time of recording is tomorrow. Really looking forward to starting to get into the games and, analytics behind. If you have not watched the first two episodes in this series, I highly recommend going back and looking. There were two, one dedicated to episodes number A through D, the other for E through H. This episode is going to be a little non-conventional compared to the other two. There's going to be groups I through L, and then we're actually going to walk through and do the final prediction based on those group picks all the way to the end. So that'll be at the tail end of this episode. Really looking forward to that. But let's dive right into it. And diving into Group I, we have reached another team. I mentioned as we keep going, I'll mention some of the teams that I feel like can actually win this tournament. This is another one of those teams in France, obviously. This is the most talented attack in world football. Really interested to see what this team does at right back. I know Jules Koundé has been struggling. Rabiot obviously is one of the favorites for Didier Deschamps. But that front three of Mbappe, Dembele, Olise is going to be absolutely box office to watch. Interested to see if they're going to be using Desiree Doué in behind there. Curious to see really what they end up doing with that number 10 position. If they end up just playing a 4-3-3, or if they go into that 4-2-3-1. If it's Marcus Thuram who plays a little bit, and they do like a two-striker setup. They have a lot of options. Like I said, very talented team, the best attack in world football. I just think that the biggest question marks going into this tournament is that midfield. I think the World Cup tends to be a very midfield-oriented tournament, so they would need, a huge tournament from Orlan Tchouameni. They would need N'Golo Kante at 35 now to turn back the clock, and can Rabiot really replicate his prime form. They have Manu Kone, who's a very interesting player, and then obviously Zaire Emery. So that midfield, I think that's easily the biggest question. I think left back, very solid with Theo Hernandez, and then that center back pairing with the goalkeeper Upamecano and Saliba, for me is top three in terms of center back pairings at the tournament. The second team is Senegal in this group. Really talented group, I think top to bottom. Senegal obviously controversially did not retain their African Cup trophy after winning it in Morocco and then having it stripped, but they won the match. Really interested to see how this team plays. Obviously on really good form. They lost to Morocco recently in a friendly actually. And this is just their fourth tournament. So interested to see. I think the wing play is the biggest thing for this team. Ismaila Sarr and Sadio Mane. How does Mane play? They have a really aging core. Obviously, Idrissa Gana Gueye, 36. Koulibaly, 34. Mane, as mentioned, 34. Edouard Mendy is also 34. So again, aging core. Really interested to see how they play with some of the new younger players coming up. One of the biggest names to watch, I think, like I mentioned, Ismaila Sarr, and then Pepe Matar Sarr from Tottenham, of course. The third team, and this is going to be the surprise in this group, is Iraq. Obviously, they were runners up and then won the Intercontinental Playoff against Bolivia to get to this phase. Really interesting team. Not a lot of players that people watching may know. The biggest one is El Hamadi, who's the Luton Town striker, and then Zidane Iqbal, who is the Manchester United former academy player. Really interested to see how this team does. Obviously, from a group perspective, the favorability of their matchups is really difficult. This is their first World Cup in 40 years. To get here, they had a win against UAE. They played decent against Saudi Arabia, but I think probably this will end up being a fourth place finish for them. And then I think this is a bit of a wild card. This and Ecuador. I thought when I was going through this preparation for the tournament, really shined out, and that's Norway. Obviously, they had a marvelous campaign from qualifying, 8 wins out of 8. They scored 37 goals in those 8 games in a group with Italy, and they just dispatched of them seven goals over 2 games against the Italians. Obviously, it goes without saying, this team is just built around Erling Haaland, Martin Odegaard, and Sorloth. I think the first 2 names more so than the third by a lot. This is going to be an absolutely huge tournament, obviously, for Holland. I think starting the tournament off against Iraq is great for them. Oscar Bob is another interesting one. Just tons of talent, really physical, tall team. They have, Sander Berge, ton of talent, top to bottom. Obviously, Ryerson, another player that is well known from Dortmund. So, in terms of the order for this group, I think the French will top it. I think Norway in second. I think that's been pretty much the consensus for a lot of the teams, although I think Senegal have a really, really good chance in that second, third spot. And then I think Iraq will be in fourth. So moving on to Group J now. Another really, really interesting group, top to bottom. I think, again, there's like 3 teams in terms of like an upper tier and then a fourth. Argentina. This is another one of those teams I think would not be a surprise to win the tournament. Obviously, they're the defending champions, back-to-back Copa America winners. And, a lot of questions, I think, around what Messi's role is going to be in the friendlies. Obviously, he hasn't been playing 90 minutes. He's been more of like a sub. Does he have the fitness, or are they going to position the team in a way where he's going to be able to play this 90 minutes? I'm assuming the answer to that is yes. What does the striker setup look like? Is there going to be a 2-striker formation with Lautaro Martinez and Julian Alvarez? Are they going to bring in someone like Nico Paz into the mix? And obviously, this team just structurally, defensively tends to be rock solid. Obviously, still a lot of the same core that won the tournament 4 years ago. Still Enzo Fernandez, De Paul, and McAllister in that midfield. The defense very similar across the board. Romero is a big question mark. I know he was injured late in the season for Tottenham. So will he be back in time for this tournament? And if not, is that Otamendi who steps in? And like I said, we'll see what they do up front, if they're going to be using Simeone. I know they've been using Almada a lot in these friendly matches. But I think one of the clear favorites for the tournament, and a very, very tough out. And obviously with the climate, this is something we haven't really talked about in the last 2 episodes. I think that will play favorably to a lot of these South American teams. The second of which is in this group is Algeria. Algeria, really, really interesting. I think they are the wild card of this tournament. Just in terms of what type of football that they're going to play. We've seen from them like the highs. Just recently, a 1-0 win against Netherlands in a friendly in Netherlands, where they had like a literal Jekyll and Hyde first half, second half type of situation. Or is it going to be, again, like the poor side, which I thought in AFCON they were pretty poor. Algeria are a little bit of a weird one. There's like this old guard in the team. Obviously, like a lot of the names that people are familiar with, like Riyad Mahrez and Aissa Mendy. But there's also a lot of really, really, really good youth talent that's coming up. I think the biggest name to watch for this tournament, maybe in all of Africa as a talent, is Ibrahim Maza, the Bayern Leverkusen man. And then obviously Haj Musa, who scored in that Netherlands game and actually plays there, is fantastic. So really, really interested to see how they play. Obviously, maybe is it going to be Mahrez that gets kicked, and starts playing that super sub role, or are they going to kind of turn to his experience? Amoura was doing fantastic from a form perspective earlier in the year, but has kind of slipped away a little bit. So what do they do up front? But I think if they can unlock Maza and his capabilities, there is a ton of talent on this team. They're obviously a huge wild card. Really, really interested to see how Petkovic sets them up. The third of these 4 teams is Austria. Obviously, Austria, coached by Ralf Rangnick. Another one of those teams that just tends to do really, really well from, at the Euros. This is obviously their first World Cup since '98, where they finished first in their group to get here. Another team here in this group with an aging core, obviously Marko Arnautovic. That's been their talisman for a really, really long time. David Alaba. Marcel Sabitzer, all of these players, later in their 30s. Konrad Leimer, who's 28, and then Christoph Baumgartner, really interesting player for Leipzig, plays kind of that number 10 shadow striker type of midfielder, tends to really get in and around the box. So interested to see how this team plays. From a qualifying perspective, like I said, they were really, really good in terms of finishing first in their group, dispatching of Bosnia, who finished second, who also were in that tournament. So really interested to see. I think from a fixtures perspective, this really does tailor to them. They start against Jordan, and then they go to Argentina, and then I think that last game against Algeria is the one that I have circled for this group in terms of being all to play for. The last team in this group is none other than Jordan, another one of these debutants at the FIFA World Cup. Jamal Salemi is their coach. Tamari is the big star. He's the Red Man. They were second in their group behind South Korea. That's how they even got to this tournament. From a form perspective, they've been decent. 2-2 draw against Nigeria. They did get dispatched by Switzerland 4-1 a couple months prior to the tournament. And they were actually Asia Cup finalists and then lost to a hat trick of penalties in 2023. So I think this has really kind of been a golden generation for this Jordanian team to get to their first FIFA World Cup. But I do think that they are outclassed by the other three teams. And will ultimately finish fourth, which is a great segue into our predictions. So I do have Jordan in fourth. I think Austria are actually my third. Algeria in second, and Argentina in first. All right, and we head into the final two groups. So group number K, and then I feel like it's been favorite, or one of the favorites in every group that we've talked about so far, and that doesn't stop with Portugal. This is probably the team that I'm most excited to watch, not only, kind of because of being a huge fan of Cristiano Ronaldo, but just talent-wise. I think Portugal for the last couple tournaments has been like consistently pushing the needle of every tournament that they get to. We keep talking about this team is more talented than the last one, and this is the greatest Portugal team of all time, just from a talent perspective, top to bottom. I mentioned earlier in the episode when we were talking about France that the World Cup tends to be, in my opinion, a midfield-oriented tournament. And if that's the case, there is no better midfield objectively in this tournament than Portugal. They obviously have the double pivot from PSG and Vitinha and João Neves. And then they have maybe the best number 10, I think, right now in the world on form in Bruno Fernandes. And then not to mention all the talent from, a defensive perspective, from a fullback's perspective. They have the best left back in the world for me. They have, a really, really good center back pairing. João Cancelo is fantastic, and Mateus Nunes, I think, should be starting at right back for this team. They have Bernardo Silva, who's gotten a ton of interest following his move away from Man City. That's coming up this summer. I think the biggest question mark here is obviously Ronaldo. Can he find his form? Does he have, what it takes to continue to play at that top level for just one more tournament? I think that he is still the best number 9 option they have. Gonzalo Ramos, for me, doesn't challenge them enough. Doesn't challenge his place enough, in the team. And then wingers. I think wingers is the biggest question. Is it Leao, who's been really, really up and down this season for Milan? Is it Pedro Neto on the right? What's the format? Are they going to play with Bernardo Silva and kind of push one of the fullbacks up? João Felix has been really good for Al Nassr, so I think that's the biggest question mark. If they can find a set of wingers that can consistently cause problems for their opponents, sky's the limit for this team. This is, for me, like a top 2 or 3 national team in the world, maybe number 1 in terms of talent. Second, team in this group is DR Congo. 52 years since they were last in this tournament. Obviously, Yohan Wissa, that's their best player. There's a lot of players here that play for really, really good clubs, whether that's, Aaron Wan-Bissaka, Sadiki Twanzebe, and Bemba. A ton of talent on this team. Obviously, kick off the tournament against Portugal and won the playoff to get here. They beat Nigeria. And then they beat Jamaica in that intercontinental playoff, I think, when I look at the other teams in this group, I think We're obviously going to talk about Uzbekistan next. That's the matchup I think I'm really interested to see. But they have, I think a ton of talent. They're going to be a tough out. They did really, really well to win that AFCON playoff sets. So we'll see kind of where they end up in this tournament. The third team is another debutant actually, and it's another Asian debutant. That's Uzbekistan, the first Central Asian team actually to ever make the World Cup, led by none other than former Italian Ballon d'Or winner Fabio Cannavaro. Two main players here. Shomurdorov and Kushanov, obviously the Man City man, and then the former Roma striker. Those are their two best players. This is a very defensive heavy team. They went through in that third round playoff. They with a draw to the Emirates. This is a team that's going to look to sit in. They're very, very defensively compact. From a discipline shape perspective, they're going to be very, very frustrating to break down. They play that like 3-back into a 5-back. But I think ultimately, just in terms of their favor schedule, there's no favors by starting off against Colombia in Mexico and then going to Houston to play Portugal. So I think their best chance of making it out of this group will be through that kind of third place playoff. The fourth of these teams, I think this is the team that people feel has the best chance of knocking Portugal off of being first in their group. That's Colombia. They were Copa America finalists last time out. They actually finished above Brazil and Uruguay to make it back to their first World Cup since 2018. Obviously, they were quarterfinalists 4 years before that with James Rodriguez and his player of the tournament type performance. He was who they really heavily leaned on in Copa America. It's great to see him back in that national team setup. He was at Rayo Vallecano for a little bit, and now he's obviously in MLS. Obviously, Luis Diaz, their left winger, that's their best player for me. He was, one of the best wingers, if not the best at his position. I'd say him and Kvaratskhelia were both fantastic. Ton of talent, top to bottom. Davinson Sanchez, that's a question mark for me from a defensive perspective. How do they play there? They obviously are on really good form. They just played France a couple weeks ago and then lost 3-1. I believe that was to the B team and Croatia. But I do think that they're going to have a ton of home field advantage by, they play twice in Mexico, and their fans really travel well, and then they play Portugal in Miami. So, from a climate perspective, this is right up their alleyway. I think that Portugal and, some of the other European teams are going to struggle if that's the type of venues that they're going to play in. And then in addition to that, like I said, it's almost like they're going to have a home field advantage. So, this group was really, really tough to predict. I'm actually going to go Uzbekistan fourth, but I could very easily see. I just trust Congo's attack a little bit more to frustrate opponents and kind of get a 1-1. So I'm going to put Congo in third. I'm going to put Portugal to top the group, and I'm going to put Colombia. I honestly think that Portugal-Colombia game will be a draw. I just think that Portugal have a much better attack and will win this group on goal difference. And then there was one, and this is the last group of the group stage, and then we can jump into some of the predictors. I think this is, in terms of all the teams that I've listed so far, that I feel can really win the tournament. So Spain, France, Portugal, Argentina. England was my fifth, but I think England is a tier below. Obviously, there was a ton of controversy around the selections for this 26-man team. No Trent Alexander-Arnold, no Cole Palmer, no Morgan Gibbs-White. They take Jordan Henderson. That was probably the biggest surprise. That was shocking. Ivan Toney made the 26. Obviously, this team has no shortage of talent. I'm really interested to see how they set up in midfield. Jude Bellingham obviously is, for me, past Declan Rice, maybe the first name on the team sheet. A lot of question marks at center back. It was a big surprise for me. They didn't take Maguire. That's another one of those names that was missing. But tons of talent. Just looking at this lineup on the screen for those watching on YouTube, having like Reece James, Livramento, Mark Guehi, the Man City man, and then having a lot of options on the wing, whether that's Marcus Rashford. They have both Madueke and Saka for the right. They have Ollie Gordon. And then obviously this team runs through Harry Kane, who is on exceptional form. Excuse me. And then that doesn't stop all the way through the midfield, having Elliot Anderson, Declan Rice, Morgan Rogers. A lot of question marks for how Tuchel's going to set this team up. Obviously Tuchel tends to be a pragmatist from a defensive point of view. They've had, a couple slippery performances, but they were perfect in their group for qualifying. And obviously, this is a golden generation for them, in my opinion. And they have a real good chance after going to back-to-back Euro finals, a World Cup semi, and a World Cup quarterfinal. This is a World Cup This is a World Cup winner or bust for them. They have so much talent, and obviously, this is Kane's last World Cup. The second team in group number L is Croatia. Group L, not number L, is Croatia, excuse me. And, we've talked a lot about the, kind of the moving of the old guard. That might be encapsulated best by this Croatia team. Obviously, no more Rakitic for a couple tournaments now. But Luka Modric at 40 years old, Ivan Perisic at 37, Mateo Kovacic at 32, Kramaric at 34, all names that have helped Croatia make back-to-back semifinal or betters in this World Cup. Really interested to see that opening match against England. That's obviously going to be in Dallas at the Cowboys Stadium. They topped their qualifying group. That's how they got here against a tough Czechia team. From a friendlies perspective, they've been good. They obviously just lost their match against Mexico. But the question again is just, does this team have enough to just frustrate their opponents? They obviously have a lot of talent, but older talent. So really the question is just their fitness. Can they keep up with some of these younger teams? And there are fast teams in this group. We're obviously going to talk about Ghana in a moment, and England, who have tons of pace to just throw at players. So, how does this team deal with, the physicality of someone like Declan Rice and Jude Bellingham, and then Marcus Rashford, etc. And from the Ghanaian perspective, people like Semenyo and Inaki Williams, etc. So yeah, that opening match again against England, a must-watch in my opinion. The third team, another one of these African teams, obviously the quarterfinalists in 2010. Carlos Queiroz, their coach, very, very experienced from an international perspective. He's obviously managed Portugal, the well-known one, Iran and Colombia. Really interested to see how Semenyo plays. Obviously, missing Kudus is from injury is a huge loss. He's someone that caused a ton of problems at the last World Cup. Inaki Williams is a fantastic talisman to have. And then they have Suleimana, the Atalanta winger, who I think is going to cause a lot of problems for, as we mentioned, the Croatia team and their age. Thomas Partey in the midfield. This is a team that won their qualifying group. That's how they got here. Wasn't that difficult. Really just Mali was the main one. And then from a form perspective, has been doing pretty well. They just tied against Wales, but then from World Cup qualifying, some of their previous games, a draw against Mali, and then a couple wins against Comoros and Chad. They have a fantastic attack. I think Partey has a huge role to play and a lot of pace in transition. That's the biggest theme for this team. And then the last team that we're going to talk about from the 48 before we just get into those direct predictions is Panama. This is their second World Cup. Obviously, they made it to that 2018 tournament where they did play against England, and I think they lost 6-0 or 6-1. Godoy is their best player. He has 157 caps. He's their defensive midfielder. And then, obviously, Waterman is their... he was fantastic in qualifying for them, as well as Ismail Diaz. I think that for a lot of these groups, we've had a similar theme where I feel like three teams are all in the mix for that, first through third, and can really shuffle back and forth. And then there is a, fourth team that I feel like is just a tier below. Curious to see if being in CONCACAF and potentially having a lot of fans being able to travel to their games will help. But I think that this is a team probably that's going to try to sit in a lot of these matches, settle, play really compact with those two DMs sitting in front of the four, and then try to maybe get a goal from a set piece. This is an old team as well, so I think a lot of the other teams in this group, mainly England and Ghana, are going to give them a lot of trouble, especially in transition situations. So, in terms of spots, I think we can kind of start to see where this is going. Panama in fourth. Now, I'm going to put England in first. I wrestled with this for a while when I was preparing for this episode. I'm actually going to put Ghana in second and Croatia in third. Now, I can very, very easily see that being switched. I just think that Ghana is going to cause a ton of problems for this Croatia team. They're going to be more accustomed to the climate. I think that the heat, with a lot of these games happening more so like in southern stadiums, I think that that Croatia Ghana game is going to be in Philadelphia. So that's going to be pretty hot in the summer. And then Croatia again has a lot more lot more age. It's been 2 years since the Euros, and at the Euros they were looking old, and obviously had that heartbreaking tie against Italy. So I think Ghana will eke this one out. So those are my groups. So we'll just recap really quick, and then we'll get into the predictors. So in Group A, we have Mexico first, South Korea second, South Africa third, Czech Republic fourth. Group B, Switzerland in first over the host Canada in second, Bosnia in third, and Qatar in fourth. In Group C, Brazil in first. This is my surprise, obviously. Scotland second, Morocco third, Haiti fourth. I did say I think Scotland will be like very, very close with Morocco, and I just think that there would be a tie there. Group D, Turkey in first, the United States in second, Paraguay in third, Australia in fourth. In Group E, Ecuador in first, Germany in second, Ivory Coast in third, and Curacao in fourth. Group F, I had Netherlands in first, Japan, Tunisia, and Sweden in fourth. Group G, I have Belgium, Egypt in second, Iran in third, and New Zealand in fourth. Group H, I have Spain in first, Uruguay in second, Cape Verde in third, and Saudi Arabia in fourth. Group I had France, and then Norway, Senegal, and Iraq rounding out the group. Group J, Argentina, Algeria, Austria, Jordan. Group K, I had Portugal, Colombia, Congo, and Uzbekistan. Group L, I have England, Ghana, Croatia, and Panama. Now, when I went through and looked at these third place teams, I just tried to think of favorable matchups. So obviously it's going to be the best 8 in terms of by points. So I just thought about teams that could, take a couple points. I think Austria is one that I saw really quickly. I feel like they're going to have at least 3 points with a win against Jordan and maybe a tie against Algeria. I think that Morocco will be here for sure. From a goal difference perspective, with a game against Haiti. I think Croatia will be one of these teams. I think Ivory Coast will have 4 points or more. So we're at 4. This is tough. Now I'm starting to think about. I think Iran will be here as well. I could see them having at least 3 points. I think Senegal as well. And I'm going to take, I think, Bosnia. And I'm between Cape Verde and... I'm between Cape Verde, Congo, or Paraguay. The only problem I have with Paraguay is I'm not sure they'll actually beat Australia just because that group is so close. I'm gonna take. I'm gonna take. I'm gonna take Congo. I think they can beat Uzbekistan and ultimately get the 3 points that way. Um, yep. So in this round of 32, we'd have South Korea against Canada. I'm going to try to just really quickly say how I would feel about the game and why. I do think, wow, that's tough immediately. South Korea against Canada. I think South Korea would edge this. So Ecuador against, from a Canadian perspective, I just think there's so many question marks around health. That's obviously something we talked about with Alfonso Davies. So does that start to catch up to them as this tournament continues? I think so. So I'd take South Korea. Ecuador against Morocco. My goodness. Morocco obviously have a ton of attacking talent against all the defensive talent that Ecuador has on display. I'm gonna take Ecuador to keep rolling on through this tournament. Netherlands and Scotland. I think if you offer that as a round of 32 matchup to the Dutch before the tournament started, they'd be incredibly happy. I struggle to see how Scotland can break down that defense. Brazil against Japan. Really good matchup. The Japanese are going to be a really tough out. I just struggle to think how they can deal with Vinicius Jr. and Rafinha on the breaks. They did beat Spain and Germany at the last tournament. That's tough. I'm gonna lean Brazil. I'm gonna lean Brazil. France versus Iran. I'm gonna take France. I think this is the easiest one to predict so far. I just cannot see the French not being able to break down the Iranian defense. Although the French do tend to make these games unnecessarily close. Wow, Germany versus Norway. What a game. Obviously the Germans have a ton of question marks just from the time I last recorded. Leonard Carl is out for the tournament and they brought in Asano Jorogo. They just had their game against the United States and won. I'm gonna lean Germany. I feel like it's been all favorites, but I'm gonna lean Germany. Mexico against Ivory Coast. For the Mexicans, it's been the curse of getting out of the groups and then losing the first one in the round of 16. Now it's the round of 32. I just can't see their tournament ending against Ivory Coast as good as they are. Man, this is tough. I'm gonna take Ivory Coast. I think this is probably my first upset. I just think they have so much attacking talent that I'm really curious to see, and I think that's gonna be a nightmare to deal with for the Mexicans. England versus DR Congo. Yeah, I don't see England's tournament ending here. Way too much talent. I think that they actually dispatch of them decently easy, 2 or 3-0. Turkey versus Bosnia. Tough game again. But I think another favorable matchup for Turkey. I just think that from, again, a talent perspective, coaching perspective, I think that they edge this one out. I think really excited to see that Arda Güler, Kenan Yildiz duo, as I mentioned in that first episode. Belgium versus Senegal. I'm actually going to take the upset here. I know the Belgians just won 5-0 against Tunisia, actually. I think a day after I recorded. But I just like what Senegal did in AFCON. I think that they're going to have. I just like this matchup for them, and I don't see them being a one and done team. Colombia versus Ghana. As much as I like Ghana and their talent, I'm going to take Colombia here. Again, their fans travel really well. They have a ton of talent. They made the last Copa America final, so I'm gonna lean them. Spain against Algeria. As much as I would love to pick Algeria, Spain is probably the best team on form if it's not Argentina. I cannot see them losing to Algeria. Switzerland versus Austria. I'm going to take the Swiss. I'm one of those teams that just always frustrates big opponents. They can lose on their day, but they have a great core, like I mentioned. And will play really, really well, and I just think there'll be a little bit too much for Austria. Wow, Argentina, Uruguay. I mean, this is like a game where no one wins, right? This is a huge, huge rivalry. This is going to be an ugly 1-0 in extra time type win with 20 cards, but I'm going to take Argentina. Portugal versus Croatia, really tough game for the Portuguese. I think Croatia are one of those teams that can, give one of these big teams a terrible day. I'm gonna stick with Portugal. I don't think their tournament ends here. And then the United States versus Egypt. I'm gonna take the U.S. I think from yeah, I'd be surprised if they lose on home soil to Egypt to end their tournament. All right, we get into the round of 16. Round of 16 starts off with Ecuador, France. They do not get easier to predict. I'm going to take the French. The biggest thing for Ecuador is they don't score that much, but they defend really, really well. And there is no better team in world football to help break down that tough defense. They have just numbers to throw. And by the time we get to the round of 16 in this tournament, having Doué, Barcola, Akliouche, Cherki, etc. from the bench is going to make the world of difference, and their players are just going to be so fresh from an attacking perspective. South Korea versus Netherlands. Wow. I'm going to take the Dutch. Again, their defense fantastic. Maybe the best top to bottom at this tournament, and they're going to be fresh, like I said, from a defensive perspective. Brazil versus Germany, a rematch of the 7-1 from 2014. I actually wasn't that high on Brazil going into this bracket, but now that I'm seeing it play out, like having Japan and then Germany, I think they beat the Germans. I really do. A lot of question marks on those wings versus the fullbacks for Germany, but I don't think Germany has the type of team to exploit Havertz. Not Havertz, excuse me. Florian Wirtz is more of someone who wants to tuck inside, and I don't think that their fullbacks are going to give Alexandro and Wesley some problems. Ivory Coast versus England. I think the English continue moving forward. No really big surprises so far. Just too much, I think, for Ivory Coast, who I think would be very happy with where they ended up at this tournament. And I think that's the one of the last African teams. Just Senegal is left. Colombia versus Spain. What a game this would be. I'm going to take the Spanish. No really big upsets so far. I know this has been a little bit boring from an upsets perspective. But just, tons of attacking talent. Top to bottom, defensively really good. Midfield-wise with Pedri, Rodri, Olmo, Marino, etc. Just a bunch of different looks and bodies they can throw at you. Turkey versus Senegal. This would be unbelievable. I'm going to take the upset here. I'm going to take Senegal to knock off Turkey. As much as I want to pick Turkey here, again, I just think that Senegal have this core, a lot of veteran leadership. I think it's so impressive what they were able to do in AFCON to win in Morocco against Morocco. I love their coach, Tia, and I'm gonna trust their core here to get the job done. Argentina versus the U.S. I think that the last host goes home. I think Argentina dispatches of them. This again, such a well knit team, such a well coached team, and so much talent. Switzerland versus Portugal. This is a really tough bracket for Portugal to have to go through Croatia and then Switzerland. I'm gonna take Portugal. Obviously, this was the round of 16 matchup from the last tournament that was 6-1. Again, just there's just too much talent on this team. I think the Swiss are gonna really frustrate. I would not be surprised if this is an extra time 1-0 type of game or 2-1. But I think the Portuguese squeak through. And then we get to 8, and I'm just looking at this matchup. France versus Netherlands. A rematch of what we got in the Euros. I'm gonna lean with the French. Deschamps has only lost 2 or 3 games. I think he's lost 2 at the World Cup, and both of them were one of them was in the final, and one of them was deep in the tournament in 2014. I'm gonna take France. I just struggle to see who gets the goals from Netherlands that could, kind of out attack a French team. I think this is a 2-1 or a 3-1. Spain versus Senegal. I'm going to take the Spanish. Obviously, they lost to an African team that ended their tournament last time, but I think the last African team goes home. Brazil versus England. This is a crazy game. This is the first team I think that can really exploit Brazil's weaknesses that we've talked about in this bracket. Again, Brazil's biggest weakness for me is their wingbacks, and they have question marks in midfield. And I think that England are set up really well to do that. Maybe a lot of question marks on that right side if it's Bukayo Saka, if it's Madueke. But from that left side, they can exploit them with Marcus Rashford. And I think that they have the talent to deal with Brazil's midfield for sure, with all the numbers they have there, Declan Rice, Mainu, Anderson, etc. But also defensively to deal with Vinicius Jr., I think with Livermento, and then some of the help from the center backs, and I think they're going to be well coached by Tuchel. I'm going to take England, but this is, again, like a lot of these games this deep in the tournament, can very easily go either way, which leads us to match 100. This one's actually in Kansas City if it happens. This would probably be the most heated game of all time from a social media perspective. It would be Argentina versus Portugal. Messi versus Ronaldo in both their last World Cups. This is so tough. This is so tough. I just think there's a lot more question marks about Argentina going to this tournament, which is crazy to say because they've won 2 Copas and a World Cup. But I just think that Portugal, from a talent perspective, is better. From a coaching perspective, I would lead Argentina, but the question is, like, by the time they get this deep in the tournament, they've played 5 games. I feel like Portugal have more bodies that can replenish, and they can rotate better, and Argentina are a little bit thin for me. I'm gonna take Portugal. This is so tough. I'm gonna lean Portugal, and then. Wow, this is a rematch of the Euro semi from 2 years ago, France versus Spain. I'm gonna take the Spanish. I'm gonna take the Spanish here. This is really tough. I know I've said that so many times, but we get into the other semi of England Portugal. I'm gonna take. I don't think if Portugal's on this type of run and they beat Argentina, obviously England would have beaten Ivory Coast and then Brazil. I just think Portugal are such a terrible matchup. I mean, we talked about England's midfield just in the last matchup against Brazil. Now think about how they're going to fare. Declan Rice and Mainu against Vitinha, Bruno Fernandes, and João Neves is ridiculous, which would set up a Nations League final rematch in the final of the World Cup. And could you imagine 41-year-old Cristiano Ronaldo in the final against Spain and Lamine Yamal? I actually wrestled with Spain and Portugal as my pre-tournament favorites, or who I thought would win it, and they're going to match up in the final if this bracket is what happens. Ooh. I'm gonna take Portugal. I just think this is I think this is a midfielders tournament. It's always been a midfield and defense tournament for me. The World Cup, and like a tournament of attrition and who can rotate their team the best. And I just think Portugal have head and shoulders the best midfield in the world, and I just think that's so important in this tournament. I'm going to take France to win the 3rd place. Obviously, if this happened, probably one of those midfielders would end up being player of the tournament. I would not be surprised if Lamine is young player of the tournament for this World Cup. But that'll do it. Obviously, we're going to be doing more episodes as this World Cup starts. It'll be tomorrow. Mexico and South Africa, and then South Korea versus Czechia. Really interested to see how right or how wrong some of these predictions are. Excuse me. I thank you so much for watching, and obviously we'll be back in the future for analysis of the games and how they start to go, and hopefully Abdi Salah will be back for those episodes. Thanks. Have a good one.